Good morning students. Myself Jyoti Nahar from Shiv Jyoti Educational Group, Kota, and today I will be taking class 6 science, and the chapter that we are going to do today is chapter number 5, separation of substances. So children, open your books to page number 61 and we are going to start chapter number 5, that is separation of substances. Before starting the chapter, let me tell you the important points of this chapter. The important points to remember in this chapter are introduction, mixtures and types of mixtures, characteristic properties of mixtures we are going to do, need for separation, methods of separation. In this we will be discussing 4 methods of separation of mixtures, that is sieving, threshing, winnowing and hand picking. These are the methods which we are going to discuss in this video part 1. In the rest of the methods we will be discussing in our video part 2. So let us start students. First of all, you all know that all the things that are present on the earth, most of the materials, they are all mixtures. Like your tea. What is tea? It is a mixture of sugar, water, milk. Again soil. Soil is again a mixture of clay, sand, dead remains of plants and animals, and many mineral salts are also there. Similarly, air is also a mixture of gases, water vapors, smoke, dust. All these things, they are mixtures. Now, how are these mixtures formed? These mixtures are formed when we combine pure components of pure substances. Means it comprises of components or constituents, we call them. What are these constituents? These constituents may be pure. Now, what are pure substances? We are going to take up. Pure substances consist of only one type of particles, like oxygen, gold, silver. All these substances, they contain particles of only one kind, which have a definite composition and its properties are also fixed. And these properties and composition are entirely different from the properties and composition of another element. So, we call them pure substances. And when these pure substances, 2 or more pure substances, they combine, they form mixtures. So, what is a mixture? A mixture contains 2 or more different substances mixed together in any proportion. So, there is a line on page number 61, the last line you can underline. What is a mixture? A mixture contains 2 or more different substances mixed together in any proportion. So, students, you came to know that what are mixtures. Mixture, it is a combination of 2 or more substances when we combine them in any proportion. The proportion may be different in different mixtures. Now, coming up to types of mixtures. On the basis of their visibility, we divide mixtures into 2 types. Mixtures, they are of 2 types, that is homogeneous mixtures and heterogeneous mixtures. Now, let us see what are homogeneous mixtures. Homogeneous mixtures are the mixtures where the components are visible to us, the components are not visible to us. Like when we dissolve salt in water, the salt molecules, they mix, they get into the water, they get into between the spaces of water molecules, and thus we are not able to identify salt and water differently. We are not able to see the components differently. So, homogeneous mixture is a mixture where the components are not visible to us, like salt and water. It is a homogeneous mixture. Similarly, if I mix lemon juice with water, they both form a mixture in which the constituents are not separated, or they are not visible separated separately. Now, heterogeneous mixtures. Heterogeneous mixtures are mixtures where the components are visible. The different components are visible to us, like fruit salad. Fruit salad is an example of heterogeneous mixtures. You have different fruits in a combination, but you are able to identify the different fruits in it, that the components are visible to you. You can separate them out easily by any simple techniques. So, these were about homogeneous mixtures and heterogeneous mixtures. Now, coming up to our next topic, that is characteristic properties of mixtures. Now, we have the characteristic properties of mixtures. There are 5 points of this. You can find on page number 62, students. 5 characteristic properties of mixtures are given in your book. The first one is physical change, like the components of a mixture. When we mix two components, the components, they do not undergo any chemical change. Their physical properties are retained. And homogeneity, the next characteristic property is homogeneity. As I told you, mixtures, they may be homogeneous or heterogeneous. Like homogeneous mixtures, if I mix sugar with charcoal, heterogeneous mixtures, like if I mix sugar with charcoal, it is a heterogeneous mixture because I can very easily separate out the components. Similarly, homogeneous mixtures like sugar and water, the components are not visible, they completely mix with each other. So, the constituents, they may be homogeneous, mixtures may be homogeneous or heterogeneous. The third identity or the third characteristic property given in your book on page number 62 is variable composition. Now, the composition of these mixtures is never fixed. They may be present in any composition, means the composition is not constant. The ratio may differ from mixture to mixture. Then we have energy changes. No liberation of energy is there, like heat is not evolved because no chemical change is taking place. And the second last one is separation of constituents, separation of these constituents from the mixtures. It is very easily, they can be easily separated by applying any simple method of separation. Then we have no specific property, means when we combine the mixtures like salt and water, when they combine together, no specific property change is there. Salt retains its own properties and water retains its own properties. So, no property change is there, takes place when a mixture is combined or when a mixture is formed. So, these were the characteristic properties of mixtures. Now, coming to the next topic, that is need for separation. Now, children, you must be wondering, why do we separate the components of the mixtures? What is the need for separation, separating these components or the constituents of mixtures? Yes, we are going to discuss here 3 points why this is necessary. The first one is to remove harmful or unwanted constituents. Now, children, you must have also observed that sometimes when your mama brings pulses, she takes it in a bowl or in a plate, and she picks out and separates some unwanted things. Some stones are there, some unwanted leaves or grains, husks are there with the grains. So, we need to remove it to get the pure substances. So, there is a need to remove these harmful or unwanted substances which are not needed or which may spoil the grains or pulses. And another way, means need why we separate this constituents is to separate the different useful constituents like petroleum, or you can say crude oil. We can get petrol, diesel, kerosene from petroleum or crude oil. So, by separation method, like in this we use this fractional distillation. It is given on page number 63. You can underline, students, the separation of these are separated in the refinery by fractional distillation. Fractional distillation of petroleum is done, and then we obtain petrol, diesel, kerosene from this. And all these substances, petrol, kerosene and diesel, they are specifically used. They can be used individually, or each component is useful for us. So, to separate these useful components or to obtain these useful components, we need to separate the mixtures. And the third point here is to obtain highly pure samples of substances. Like distilled water, it is a highly pure form of water, and this is used in car batteries, in your medicines, in research, and in many industries. So, to obtain this pure substance, pure form of water, we need to separate the impurities, and this is how distilled water, after refining or after separating the impurities, we get the highly pure form of water, that is distilled water. So, these were the needs. Why do we separate the components of mixtures? Now, coming up to methods of separation. Methods of separation, we have different methods by which we separate the impurities, or we can say components are separated. Here we are going to discuss sieving, threshing, winnowing and hand picking. These four methods are the methods of separating solid from solid components. Here these four methods can be used when both the components are solid. So, we are going to discuss these one by one on our digiport. Now, students, we are going to discuss methods of separation of mixtures. Here, a mixture is formed when we combine two or more pure substances. Like if A, B and C combine, they form a mixture, and these A, B and C, they are called the components or constituents of the mixture. Like you can say a fruit salad is an example of mixtures, where you have different fruits combined in any proportion it may be, and you can very easily separate the different fruits from it by any simple method or by any applying by any simple means. See here, you can easily pick out or separate the constituents. But what if you are asked to separate the grains from a chaff? You need to do it by using some different methods. Here we are going to discuss the separation of solid from other solids. Now, what are the methods we are going to see here? We are going to, there are four methods for separating solid from other solids. The first one is sieving, threshing, winnowing and hand picking. These are the methods where we can separate one solid from the other solid component. Now, taking up one by one, the first one is sieving. In this, we use a sieve which contains small holes in it. When we are Sieving, this is used if the components of the mixture, they are of different size. Like when we sieve or when we sift flour, the flour particles, the smaller fine particles of flour, they come down through the pores of the sieve, and the rough or the bran, it remains on the sieve. This is how you can see when there is a difference between the size of the particles, the smaller particles, they come down through the pores, and the heavy particles or the bigger particles, they retain in the sieve. You can also separate rice that is much smaller than the pulses. Here the size is different. Similarly, this process is also used to separate the bran from the flour. So, this is a method which is usually used to separate the constituents when they are of different sizes. Children, you must have seen at the construction sites, big sieves are used to separate the pebbles and stones which are present in the sand. To obtain pure sand or fine quality of sand, they use at the construction sites, big sieves are used to get this sand and to separate stones from them, pebbles from them. So, to separate the constituents or the components where the size is different, or to obtain the components in pure form, this sieve is used, and sieve of different sizes having different size of pores can be used to separate different size of components. Taking up the next one, that is threshing. Now, threshing is done to remove the grains from the stalks. Large bundles of stalks of grains, they are tied together and they are beaten on some hard surface. Like you can see here, they are beating the stalks, they have collected it in bundle, and when these are beaten on any hard substance, the grains or the seeds, they are separated out from the stalks. So, you can see here that threshing, it is done to separate the grains from the stalks, and this is usually done after harvesting the crops. This is given on page number 63, students, threshing. And then next process, that is winnowing. In this, the property of the material, that some material they are lighter whereas some are heavier. This property is used to separate the components of a mixture using winnowing. This is a method of separating grains from the mixture of grain and chaff. Grain and the chaff is separated from the grains using this winnowing method. This is the property that the light materials they are blown with the air is used here. Like you can see here, in winnowing, the grains which contain chaff, they are allowed to fall from a height. As you can see, the lighter chaff, that is light, it is blown away by the wind and it falls apart. It forms a separate heap, whereas the heavier grains, they fall directly below where we are removing it. So, according to the size or according to the weight, they form separate heaps, and this is how we can separate the grains from the chaff by following the method winnowing. Coming up next is hand picking method. Now students, this is a very common method which you must have used, you must have observed your mama using this method. Even you do it. Sometimes when your mama serves you fried rice and you don't like to have coriander leaves, or you want to separate the onion pieces from it, what do? You take it out and by hand and separate the particles, or you separate the onion particles from it or the coriander leaves from it. So, what is that simple method? That is, as the name suggests, it is hand picking, means picking up by hand. So, grains are separated from waste and impurities, and this process is done when the impurities are small in quantity. They are less in quantity. So, we are easily able to separate the impurities from the grains. Like you can see here, small stones or small stalks which are present in the grains, they are separated simply by picking up them from our hand and separating it away. You must have observed this method followed by your mama when she is cleaning the grains or pulses like your rice at your homes. Similarly, this process, a simple hand picking, can be used to separate black grapes from green grapes. Black grapes or green grapes, they can be easily picked up and separated into black grapes and green grapes. So, these were the methods which are used to separate solid from another solid substances. So, students, these were the 4 methods for separation of solid from solid. In our video part 2, we will be doing the separation of solid from liquid substances. So, I hope you have understood the first part of video. So, we will be discussing the other methods in our second part. Thank you, students.